Okay, today we're going to be talking about inequalities and how you solve inequalities when you're doing multiplication and division. So my very first inequality that I have, this is less than and equal to, and I have x divided by 5 is less than or equal to 3. And I want to solve for just x. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to circle this. And I know it's division of 5 because of the bar. So the opposite of dividing by 5 is multiplying by 5. So I'm going to multiply this side of the equation by 5, and I'm going to multiply this side of the equation by 5. And remember that 5 is the same as 5 over 1. And so when you remember multiplication, you can reduce early by dividing by 5 on both of these. This all becomes 1x because everything cancels to 1x over 1. So I got x. I keep my sign as it is, less than or equal to, and then I've got my 3 times my 5. And again, remember, you can always use your calculators, but it is a basic fact this time for 15. If it's fractions or decimals or has positive and negative numbers, please feel free to use your calculator. And then on this, it says we want to also graph it. So this is something that we've been doing now for a couple of weeks. We just draw our line, make sure to include the 15 on it, and then we will put a closed circle because of the equal sign, and then it's less than, x is on the left, so we can keep it as it is, and it goes to the left. So we would go this way with it. Make sure that you can tell which direction you're going when you only do it with your own handwriting versus, so you might even erase this so I know it's not two arrows and not know which direction you want it to go. The second one I'd like to try with you is when it's 6x is greater than negative 18. Remember that this is multiplication. So this is the x side. This is what I want to get rid of. So to get rid of multiplying, I divide. So I'll divide by 6. I'll divide by 6. This cancels out and becomes 1x. This is still the same sign, and this is a negative 18 divided by 6. Don't forget that that means it's going to be a negative 3. So then graphing this one would be your negative 3. We put a negative 2 here, a negative 4 here. No line. No line means it is not equal to the negative 3. So we're going to open circle the negative 3, but we are going to go greater, so that is to the right. So that is how you take multiplication and division and you solve equations, and you can graph your equation at the end then. Remember, we don't change these to equal signs. People on their quizzes, we're taking them and changing them to equal signs. They are not equal. There's still a lot of answers that could be true for these. But this is how you represent it then with an inequality. If you think you have these, I have two more I'm going to show you that are kind of tricky, and then you're going to have time to try some on your own. And on the next 3 or I think 4 pages, you're going to have like 4 problems. I want you to only choose 2 of each page to do because then you'll have more time to get started on your homework. So try 2 and then click the next button and it will show you the answers. And then I'll click the next button. I'll show you 4 more problems. Do 2 of them. Click the next button. Check the 2 that you did. You can do all 4 if you would like the extra practice, but 2 you have to do to show me for the responsibility ticket the next day. Okay? So moving on to the last 2 that I want to show you, because these are the tricky ones, and I don't want you to confuse what we just learned from what we are going to learn now. And I'm going to show you why also. So this is the one. I'm going to put both up here so they're ready to go. Okay, so this is the first one, and it says negative 3 over 2 times n is less than or equal to 6. So what we're saying is we got to get rid of this. Now, because it's a fraction, you can choose to do 2 things. You can choose, because this is multiplication, you can choose to do negative 3 over 2 divided by negative 3 over 2 on your calculator. But if you're going to do it hand by hand, usually multiplication or division changes to multiplication by the reciprocal. So you could also multiply by the reciprocal if you're doing it by hand. So I would do times, and I would flip it to 2/3. But because it's negative, I would still leave it negative. Okay? So we're going to multiply by net because 2 negatives will make a positive. And over here, I'd have to multiply by negative 2/3. Remembering that this is 6 over 1. Okay? Otherwise, on your calculator, you can just take 6 times negative 2/3 and not worry about it over 1. but I'm going to do this mentally, so we're not going to get our calculator right now, but you sure can. 6 times negative 2/3. This will end up canceling the 2's, canceling the 3's. That all becomes 1. 2 negatives make a positive, so your answer is n by itself. And then you're going to switch the sign. And the reason you're going to switch the sign is because you're multiplying by a negative. And when you multiply by the opposite, you have to cross the zero side. Remember on ST Math, it always flips it when you're multiplying by an opposite, by the negative. It flips it on the other side of the line. I'm going to show you another reason in just a minute so you can make more visual sense of that. And then this is 1 and this is 2. So 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. And we would graph that this way with our negative 4, a negative 3, a negative 5. With the equal sign, we're going to full circle that, and it's going to be greater this way. Okay? I want to show you something in case it's confusing to you why we flip the sign. So negative 3 halves n is less than or equal to 6. What you could do to see this better is just say, I'm going to add this on the other side because I don't like a negative n. I want a positive n. So we're going to make it positive. So we're going to do plus 3 halves n. So plus 3 halves n. So then on this side, we're going to get negative, or we're actually going to get 0 because this is a 0 pair. Remember that when you add a negative and a positive of the same number, it becomes a 0 pair. So that becomes a 0 pair. So you got 0 is less than or equal to your 3n, 3 halves n, and this is a positive because there's nothing in front of it, so it's a positive 6. And now what's going to happen is you can do your two-step equation and subtract 6 on both sides. So you get your negative 6 is less than or equal to your 3 halves n. And then when you do the reciprocal 2/3 and 2/3, you would get the negative 4, because 2/3 times negative 6 less than or equal to, and this will all be positive then. What you'll notice is this is the same as this. So you have two choices. You can either add this on both sides because we don't want a negative n, or we can multiply by a negative, but remember that when you multiply by a negative, it's like flipping it. So you have to flip the sign. Only when you multiply or divide by a negative number, you flip the sign. Otherwise, the sign always stays. That is the biggest thing that you're learning on example 3, and I'm going to do example 4 the same way. And that's the reason why. You're going to have a lesson about it in class, or if you catch it from this then and do well, you will be able to work on your homework without that. So over here we've got negative 3z. Let's try the other way first this time and just add 3z. Add 3z. So if I add 3z, I got 0 greater than a negative 4.5 plus 3 is going to be a negative 1.5, correct? So if I have a negative 1.5 and a 0, and I add, oh, sorry, I'm not doing that right. This is z. So I'm going to have negative 4.5 plus 3z. That was a z, not a 2. I was doing that wrong. So sorry. Hopefully you caught that. It's 3z, 3z. So it's negative 4.5 plus 3z. Just rewriting it straight out. This was a 0 pair. That stayed. And then I have this. So to get this figured out, I would subtract add 4.5 to make a 0 pair. But that means I have to add 4.5 over here. So it makes me 4.5 is greater than 3z. And then what you can do to get t by itself is divide by 3, divide by 3. So then your z is going to be your 1.5. To see it the other way, if you like to do it the quicker way, is just to say the negative 3z is greater than negative 4.5. Instead of adding it, just divide by a negative 3, divide by a negative 3, but because I'm dividing by a negative, that becomes a flipped sign. Flip your sign, z, and this is 1.5 because of two negatives. So this and this is the same thing because Z is less than and Z is less than. I know I put a lot of information into the last two because I showed you two ways to do each one. Keep in mind, if you multiply or divide by a negative number, you're going to flip the sign. If you multiply by a positive number or you multiply by a positive or divide by a positive number, the sign stays. Remember, only two problems a piece on each of the next 4 pages, and you can start your homework or show me that work to get a responsibility ticket as well.